It was 2:03 a.m. when the cameras caught the shadow. A figure, wrapped in a long dark coat, face masked, shoes silent on the wet asphalt, emerged from the alley behind 56th Street. The city's lights flickered above, but the figure moved like smoke, intangible, untraceable, and gone before anyone noticed. Less than 5 minutes later, a scream pierced the silence. The woman in apartment 7B was found with her eyes wide open, mouth frozen mid-breath, body lifeless on the cold kitchen floor. There was no blood, no signs of forced entry, no footprints, fingerprints, or hair. Just one thing: a fine white powder dusted beneath her nose, barely visible except under UV light. The city had been haunted by a string of killings like this, 8 to be exact. New York, Chicago, Boston, Denver, each crime scene identical in its silence, its precision, and the strange, ghostly residue left behind. The press dubbed him Dust. The FBI called him a ghost. To the public, he was a myth. To law enforcement, he was a nightmare. Special Agent Richard Harper had seen killers before. He'd studied minds darker than the abyss, interrogated men who thought they were gods. But this one was different. This one was always 10 steps ahead, like he knew what they were thinking before they thought it. And then something strange happened. A low-resolution frame in the surveillance footage, barely a flicker, showed the figure touching a wall. That wall was part of the outer structure of a federal prison. At first, they thought it was coincidence, until the same pattern showed up in a second location. And then a third. Each time, a wall, the same prison. Harper ordered the footage enhanced and re-examined. A chilling possibility began to take shape in his mind. Was the killer not outside, but inside that very prison? Enter Alex Crawford. Serving a life sentence for double homicide, Crawford had been locked away for 5 years without incident. No visitors, no appeals, no contraband, no noise. His record was spotless, eerily spotless. But Harper didn't believe in spotless. He believed in patterns, and Crawford was a pattern. They searched his cell. No phone, no laptop, no notes. But there was something small. Every night between 2 a.m. and 2:05 a.m., Crawford would stand up, face the far wall of his cell, and move his finger across it, slowly, precisely, as if tracing letters in the air. Then he would sit back down. No one paid it much attention, until Harper did. He brought in a forensic light team. What they discovered was terrifying. Crawford had been writing invisible messages using the fine white dust from crushed aspirin pills he'd been secretly collecting for months. Each message, a name, a city, a time, each one matched a murder. "How is he doing it?" one agent asked. Harper didn't answer. He was staring into the security monitor showing Crawford's cell. Crawford was smiling. That was the first time Harper realized. This wasn't a man trying to escape prison. This was a man using prison to hide. From inside his 6-by-8-foot cell, Alex Crawford was orchestrating killings with surgical precision, using invisible messages, remote operatives, and absolute control. He wasn't avoiding the law. He was the law's blind spot. And now, with each passing day, the killings grew bolder. More public, more symbolic, as if the killer was leaving a message not just for the victims, but for the ones chasing him. "I'm already inside," it seemed to say, "and I'm watching you." Harper knew this wasn't just a case anymore. It was a game, and the only way to catch Crawford was to think like him. But in a game where the rules are written in dust, and your opponent is already 10 moves ahead, the real question becomes, how do you stop a killer who doesn't even need to leave the room? The killings had a pattern, cold, calculated, and chillingly perfect. 3 high-profile figures dead in 3 different cities: a defense attorney in Los Angeles, a retired federal judge in Chicago, and a cybersecurity expert in Atlanta. Each one murdered in broad daylight, in public spaces, under heavy surveillance. Yet, not a single useful piece of evidence was left behind. No fingerprints, no witnesses, and no digital trail. The victims had no apparent connections, except for one chilling detail. They were all involved in the prosecution of a man named Damien Voss, nearly a decade ago. Damien Voss wasn't just any criminal, he was the criminal, the man behind one of the most complex organized crime networks in recent U.S. history. Brilliant, manipulative, and always one step ahead of the law, Voss had evaded justice for years until a coordinated federal operation finally brought him down. He was sentenced to 137 years without parole, locked away in a maximum security facility in Montana, far from the world he once controlled. And yet, here they were, key people from his trial, turning up dead. The media was already spinning wild theories. Some said copycats, others whispered about ghosts. But within the walls of the FBI's Behavioral Threat Unit, one terrifying question echoed louder than the rest. Is Damien Voss still pulling strings from inside his cell? Agent Mara Lynn didn't believe in coincidences. She had spent the last 5 years studying Voss's old network, watching it rot from the inside. Or so she thought. The recent killings had all the marks of a Voss operation: precision timing, psychological impact, and signature misdirection. Either he's found a way to communicate with the outside, she said to her superior, or someone out there is following his orders to the letter. From a concrete box? No tech, no visitors, no calls. It's impossible, the director replied. Mara stared at the wall of case files and shook her head. Nothing's impossible with Voss. That's what makes him Voss. She flew to the prison the next day. The guards led her down the narrow, gray corridor lined with reinforced steel doors. Cell 9 was at the end. 2 armed officers stood outside. Inside, Damien Voss sat calmly on the edge of his bed, his hands resting neatly on his lap. He looked older, yes, but not broken. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and disturbingly calm. "I heard you've been busy," he said without looking up. "I should be asking you that," Mara replied. He smiled faintly. "You think I'm behind all this?" "I think you have enemies, and they're dying in the exact order that benefits you." Voss leaned forward slowly, locking eyes with her. "Agent Lynn, the truth is more terrifying than you realize. Try me. I haven't left this room in 5 years. I haven't touched a phone, sent a message, whispered through a vent. And yet, they're still dying, aren't they?" She remained silent. "I warned them, years ago. They locked me away thinking the machine would stop." He tapped his temple lightly. "But the machine was never out there. It was always here." He leaned back again, a slight smirk on his face. "You can kill the puppets, Agent Lynn, but the idea? You can't jail an idea." Mara's spine tingled. Either he was bluffing, or something much bigger was in motion. And if Voss really had planted a system, a movement, an idea that could operate without him, then the next killing was already planned, and no one was safe. The cell was quiet. Damien Voss sat motionless, staring at the bare concrete wall as if it were a canvas only he could see. Agent Mara Lynn watched him through the observation window. 5 murders in 7 months, all with one common thread. They pointed to people who were once part of Damien Voss's inner circle, and all signs, once decoded, pointed back to him. But he had been in prison the entire time. No escape, no communication, no slip-ups, a perfect alibi. Still, something didn't add up. Mara closed the file in front of her. "Let's start with the night of the Chicago murder," she said, stepping into the cell. "Where were you on March 17th? Damien turned his eyes toward her and smiled faintly. "I was here, same as every night. Ask the guards, check the logs. I even played chess with the warden." "We did. You were here. But the man who killed Lyle Bennett used your old methods. Same pressure points, same psychological games, same message written in blood." Damien's smile deepened. "Interesting coincidence." She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out a photograph and placed it on the table. It showed a man named Marcus Hale, an ex-enforcer in Voss's old crime ring. Marcus had disappeared months ago, until his body turned up in the trunk of a burned car. "You framed him, didn't you?" she asked. Damien looked at the photo, then leaned back. His eyes grew distant, and suddenly, flashback. 3 years earlier. A dark warehouse. Marcus Hale stands across from Damien, visibly shaken. "They're closing in, Damien," Marcus whispers. "If they catch me, they won't, because you're going to disappear," Damien interrupts, handing him a passport, cash, and a phone. "Lay low. I'll contact you when it's time." Marcus hesitates. "Why help me?" Damien's eyes narrow. "Because loyalty should be rewarded, and betrayal should be useful." Present. "I gave Marcus a chance," Damien said aloud, pulling Mara out of her thoughts. "He chose to run. He always knew the consequences." "You knew you'd use him later," she accused. "He was your insurance policy, a body to pin a crime on." Damien said nothing. Flashback. 8 months earlier. A young man named Theo, barely in his 20s, sits across from a stranger in a cafe. The stranger hands him a manila envelope. "You want to prove yourself? Deliver this package to the address inside. No questions." Inside the envelope, fake credentials, a burner phone, and a custom-made mask resembling Marcus Hale. Present. "We found the mask," Mara said, placing it next to the photo, "and the fingerprints matched a kid named Theo Granger. He's dead now, too." Damien shrugged. "Sad, but again, nothing to do with me." She leaned in. "You used them both. Marcus disappeared on your orders. You fed Theo just enough ego to send him into a trap. He posed as Marcus, killed Bennett, and then you had him eliminated. No witnesses, no trail. Just you. In your cell the whole time." Damien's eyes gleamed. "You know what the difference is between genius and madness, Agent Lin." "What?" He smiled coldly. "Who's telling the story?" Mara stared at him. She had the pieces. The proof was thin, but the pattern was undeniable. He was orchestrating everything, framing, baiting, and cleaning house, from a place where no one believed he could. The man had built a prison not around himself, but around the truth. And as long as no one could see past his perfect alibi, Damien Voss would always be untouchable. Agent Mara Lin didn't believe in ghosts. But right now, the facts were making her question everything she thought she knew about isolation, control, and silence. She stood over the autopsy report of the latest victim, a former federal contractor found dead in his apartment, a chess piece in his mouth, and a strange coded message etched into the wood of his desk. E7 to F6. It wasn't the first time something like this had shown up. 2 previous victims had also left behind obscure references: a torn playing card at one scene, a music box playing a slowed-down Morse code version of Für Elise at another. At first, the FBI dismissed them as quirks, the killer's signature. But now Mara was sure of something else. They were messages, hidden clues, sent from someone inside, and all of them pointed back to one man, Damien Voss. Locked away for 5 years, no access to the outside world, no visits, no privileges. And yet, the killings matched his patterns, his psychology, his cruelty. But how? How was he communicating? Mara pushed aside the reports and looked again at the prison surveillance logs. That's when she noticed it, a strange pattern in the timing. Voss took his daily walk in the yard at exactly 3:17 p.m. every day, rain or shine. And each time he passed by inmate number 332, a quiet, older man who worked in the laundry, a man with no known connections to Voss. She dug deeper. Over the last 11 months, 7 different inmates had either been transferred, released, or mysteriously died, and each had shared time in proximity to Voss. Coincidence? Number it was a chain, a relay system. Each man had passed something to the next, sometimes just a phrase, sometimes a symbol, always meaningless on its own, but combined they formed a pipeline of communication, a secret network. She picked up the phone. Later that evening, Federal Prison Surveillance Room. Mara and the prison warden replayed recent footage in silence. Voss was sitting in the yard, drawing shapes in the dirt with his finger. "Zoom in here," she said. "Enhance the markings." The technician adjusted the view. 5 crude shapes, seemingly random. "No," Mara whispered. "That's not random. That's a cipher key." She pulled out a printed image from an earlier crime scene, the chessboard code. They matched. Voss was embedding instructions using visual ciphers, relayed through casual inmate contact, buried in conversations and meaningless gestures. Once outside, the last contact, the executor, carried out the command. The murders weren't spontaneous, they were executed with clockwork precision. And the most chilling part? The executors didn't even know who was giving the order. Mara flipped through the files. One of the released inmates, now missing, had been a maintenance worker in the prison. He had regular, unsupervised access to mailrooms, laundry, kitchen, places where Voss's network could thrive invisibly. "This isn't a prison," Mara said quietly. "It's his operations center." The warden looked stunned. "But how do we stop it?" She stared at the monitor as Voss looked straight into the prison camera and smiled. "We don't stop the network," she said. "We break the chain." Detective Mara Lynn sat across from Damien Voss in the cold, windowless interrogation room. There were no chains on his wrists, no guards in the room, just silence, steel walls, and the subtle pressure of presence. Voss didn't need physical restraints. His prison was psychological, and yet, somehow, he was the one in control. "Why am I here today, Agent Lin?" he asked calmly, tapping his fingers in a rhythmic beat on the table. "Another body found? Or are you just here to talk?" Mara didn't flinch. "You're smart, Damien, but you've gotten sloppy." He smiled. "Have I?" "We found your cipher in the yard. The code, the chess move, the signals between inmates." She leaned forward. "The entire network is collapsing. It's only a matter of time before someone talks." He laughed softly, not mockingly, almost with a hint of admiration. "That's the thing about systems, Agent Lin. When they work quietly. You only notice them when they begin to fall apart. Which means you knew I'd find it," she finished. Voss nodded slowly. "You're not like the others. They see the surface. You look underneath." Mara kept her expression blank, but her heart was racing. This was his move. Compliment, distract, unsettle. She changed the subject. "3 men dead, 2 missing, 1 in a coma, all tied to you. And yet I haven't left this room in 5 years," he said softly, folding his hands. She leaned closer. "You don't need to. You live in people's heads. You infect them. That's your trick, right? You don't kill. You make others do it for you." He tilted his head thoughtfully. "Is that worse? You manipulate, you twist people, you push them off cliffs and make them think they jumped." His eyes sparkled with something, amusement or recognition, she couldn't tell. "Funny," he said. "That's exactly what I see when I look at you." There was a pause. He continued, "You come here every week. You study me. You dig through my past. You're not trying to stop me, Mara. You're trying to understand me. Because deep down, you know the line between us isn't as thick as you'd like it to be." She stood up abruptly. "We're done." But before she could turn, Voss added, "Do you dream of the boy, Mara? The one who took your sister's life?" Her blood froze. She hadn't spoken of that case to anyone, not in years. "That wasn't in any file," she said quietly. "I don't read files. I read people." She stared at him. His smile was gone now. The game had shifted. "I know why you became a detective. I know what keeps you awake at night. That rage, that thirst. You chase killers because deep down you envy them." He leaned forward, voice barely a whisper. "They do what you can't." Mara clenched her jaw, her fists, her resolve. "Good," Voss said, satisfied. "Now you're in the game." She turned and walked out, but the weight of his words followed her like smoke. Later that night, alone in her office, Mara sat in silence, staring at the photos pinned to the board. Strings, timelines, names, all of them looping back to Damien Voss. She whispered to herself, "He wants me obsessed. He wants me to think like him." Then she looked up.